What happens when a beloved morning television host faces off against royalty gone rogue in what should have been a friendly chat? It only took one dismissive comment about working-class Britain to turn a simple interview into the most explosive talk show meltdown in television history. This is the story of how Prince Harry got himself kicked off Lorraine Kelly's show. Lorraine Kelly had been doing this for decades. The warm smile, the genuine laugh, the ability to make anyone feel comfortable in that cozy studio chair. She was Britain's sweetheart, the morning host who millions trusted with their tea and toast. So when Prince Harry walked onto her set that morning, everyone expected the usual charm, the practiced royal pleasantries, maybe a laugh or two about his life across the pond. Nobody expected what was about to unfold. The interview started normally enough. Lorraine welcomed him with her signature warmth, that bright smile lighting up the studio as always. "Welcome, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please, sit down. Make yourself comfortable." Prince Harry sat down, but there was something different about his demeanor. Something off. He wasn't doing the usual royal wave, the practiced grin. He looked annoyed, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Thanks for having me," he said, his tone flat, almost bored. Lorraine, ever the professional, pushed forward. "So, you've been away from Britain for quite some time now. What brings you back?" He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Well, I had some things to take care of. Business things. You wouldn't understand." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Lorraine's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I see. Well, I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about what you've been up to. Your life has changed quite a bit, hasn't it?" "You could say that," he replied, looking around the studio with barely concealed disdain. "Though I have to say, this setup is a bit quaint, isn't it? Bit different from the American studios I'm used to now." Lorraine laughed it off, though anyone watching closely could see the slight tension in her shoulders. "Well, we like to keep things cozy here. It's what our viewers love. Speaking of which, many of them have written in with questions for you. They're very excited you're here." He waved his hand dismissively. "I'm sure they are. Everyone always wants a piece of the royal family, don't they? Even the ones who left." "Well, that's because people care about you," Lorraine said gently, trying to steer things back to positive territory. "They've watched you grow up. They feel connected to you." "Connected?" he scoffed. "They don't know me. They never have. They just think they do, because they've seen me on their tellies." The atmosphere in the studio was growing increasingly uncomfortable. You could feel the tension rising like a wave. Lorraine's producers were exchanging worried glances from behind the cameras, frantically whispering into their headsets, trying to figure out how to salvage what was quickly becoming a disaster. The audience members were shifting in their seats, looking at each other with confusion and concern. This wasn't what they'd come to see. They'd come for the usual warm, friendly Lorraine Kelly show, not whatever this was turning into. But Lorraine Kelly hadn't become one of Britain's most respected broadcasters by giving up easily. She'd weathered storms before. She'd handled difficult guests, awkward moments, technical disasters. She knew how to navigate choppy waters. "I think that's a bit unfair," she said, her voice still kind, but with a new edge of firmness. "These are people who've supported you through everything, through the good times and the difficult ones." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Supported me? Is that what you call it? Following my every move, judging every decision, tearing apart my wife in the papers? That's support?" "Now hold on," Lorraine interjected. "I think you'll find that many people have been very supportive of you and your wife. Yes, there's been criticism, but that comes with public life. You knew that." "There it is," he said, pointing at her accusingly. "That's exactly the problem. You knew that. You signed up for this. That's what people like you always say. Like it justifies everything. Like it makes it okay that my life was torn apart, that my family was hounded, that we couldn't even go for a walk without cameras in our faces. Lorraine took a breath, maintaining her composure with visible effort. I'm not justifying anything. I'm simply saying that public figures, whether they're royalty or television presenters or anyone else, we all face scrutiny. It's part of the job. I face it too, believe it or not. Oh, spare me, he scoffed. You face scrutiny? What? Someone writes a mean comment about your outfit? Someone doesn't like your interview style? That's not the same thing. Not even close. Part of the job. His voice was rising now. You have no idea what it's like. You sit here in your comfortable little studio, asking your comfortable little questions to your comfortable little guests. You've never had to deal with what I've dealt with. The audience was dead silent. This wasn't going how anyone had expected. Lorraine's expression hardened. Actually, I've been in this industry for over 30 years. I've faced my share of criticism. Thank you very much. And I've never used it as an excuse to be rude to people who are just trying to do their jobs. Oh, please, he sneered. Don't compare your little morning show to what I've been through. You're a talk show host. I'm royalty. We're royalty, Lorraine corrected quietly. And right now, you're a guest on my show, and I'd appreciate it if you'd show some basic respect. He stood up slightly from his chair, leaning forward. Respect? You want to talk about respect? Where was the respect when the British media hounded my family? Where was the respect when they drove us out of the country? I'm not the British media, Lorraine said firmly. I'm one person, trying to have a civil conversation with you. If you can't manage that, then perhaps we should end this interview. Fine by me, he shot back. I only came here because my publicist said it would be good for my image. Clearly, that was a mistake. Lorraine's eyes flashed. Your publicist was right. You do need help with your image, because right now, you're coming across as someone who thinks he's above everyone else. Maybe I am, he said, his voice dripping with entitlement. Maybe I've realized that I don't need to sit here and be questioned by someone who makes a living gossiping about people's lives. The studio gasped. Lorraine Kelly, gossiping. The woman known for her integrity, her kindness, her genuine interest in people's stories. This was beyond insulting. Lorraine stood up now, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. I have never, ever gossiped about anyone on this show. I conduct respectful interviews with people from all walks of life. I've interviewed prime ministers and pensioners, celebrities, and everyday heroes. And I treat every single one of them with dignity. Something you clearly know nothing about. Dignity? He laughed harshly. You want to talk about dignity? You lot stripped my mother of her dignity. You stripped me of mine. And now you sit there on your high horse, pretending you're better than the rest of them. I never said I was better than anyone, Lorraine replied, her voice shaking slightly with controlled anger. But I am saying that you don't get to come onto my show and insult me, insult my work, and insult the people who watch this program. These are good, hardworking people who get up every morning and do their best. They don't deserve your contempt. Hardworking people? He mocked. Most of them are probably sitting on their sofas, living off benefits, watching telly all day. And you're their hero? The woman who tells them what to think? The studio erupted in angry murmurs. Lorraine's face went white, then red. How dare you, she said, her voice low and dangerous. How dare you insult the people of this country, the people who paid for your privileged upbringing, the people who funded your education, your holidays, your entire life. These people you're sneering at, they're nurses and teachers and shop workers and carers. They're the backbone of this country. And you have the audacity to sit in my studio and call them lazy. I didn't say lazy. I said, I know what you said. Lorraine cut him off, her famous composure finally cracking. And It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You've spent your whole life being served by people, being protected by people, being supported by people. And this is how you talk about them. He stood up fully now, straightening his jacket. I don't have to listen to this. I came here as a courtesy. And this is how I'm treated. A courtesy? Lorraine's voice was incredulous. You think you're doing me a favor. I've had everyone on this show. Actors, musicians, politicians, real royalty who actually care about people. And not one of them has ever been as rude, as entitled, as dismissive as you're being right now. That's because they're all trying to sell something, he retorted. At least I'm being honest. Honest? Lorraine shook her head. You're not being honest. You're being cruel. There's a difference. Honesty doesn't require you to put other people down. Honesty doesn't require you to act superior. You're not being honest. You're being a bully. His face went red. A bully? Me? That's rich, coming from someone who's part of the machine that bullied my family for years. I have never bullied anyone, Lorraine said, her voice steely. I have always tried to be fair, to be kind, to give people a platform to tell their stories. But I will not stand here and let you rewrite history. I will not let you paint yourself as the victim when you're the one doing the attacking. You know what your problem is? He said, stepping closer to her desk. You're so stuck in your little British bubble that you can't see the truth. You can't see how toxic this whole culture is, how fake it all is. You're all smiles and pleasantries on camera, but behind the scenes, it's all backstabbing and gossip. Get out, Lorraine said suddenly. What? Get out of my studio. Right now. He stared at her in disbelief. You can't kick me out. I absolutely can, Lorraine said, her voice like ice. This is my show. This is my studio. And I'm telling you to leave. I will not give you another second of airtime to spread your venom about the people of this country. You're making a huge mistake, he warned. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Lorraine replied. You're someone who had every advantage in life and still feels sorry for himself. You're someone who claims to want privacy, but can't stop talking about himself. You're someone who left this country, criticizes it constantly, but still expects to be treated like royalty when you visit. Well, not here. Not on my show. His jaw clenched. The public will hear about this. They'll know how you treated me. Good, Lorraine said firmly. Let them hear. Let them see the footage. Let them judge for themselves who was in the wrong here. Because I have nothing to hide. Can you say the same? He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, he looked like he might actually apologize, might actually realize how badly he'd behaved. But then his face hardened again. This country hasn't changed at all, he muttered. Still, the same small-minded, judgmental place it always was. And yet you're the one who came back, Lorraine pointed out. Nobody forced you to be here. Nobody forced you to come on this show. You made that choice. And now you're making another choice by refusing to show basic human decency. I've heard enough, he said, turning toward the studio exit. I'm leaving. Yes, you are, Lorraine agreed. And you know what? I think that's the first sensible thing you've said this entire interview. He spun back around, fury written across his face. You'll regret this. You've just made an enemy of someone very important. Lorraine actually laughed at that. Important? You gave up being important when you gave up your duties. You're just a man now. A man who behaves badly and expects everyone to make excuses for it. Well, I won't. I respect myself too much. I respect my audience too much. And I respect this country too much. This country doesn't deserve respect, he spat. And that was it. That was the final straw. Security! Lorraine called out, her voice ringing through the studio. Please escort our guest out of the building. 2 security guards appeared from the wings, approaching carefully. The prince looked between them and Lorraine, his expression a mixture of shock and rage. You're actually serious, he said. You're actually throwing me out. I am, Lorraine confirmed. And if you had any self-awareness at all, you'd understand why. But I don't think you do. I don't think you're capable of seeing past your own grievances to recognize how you've just behaved. The security guards stood on either side of him now, not touching him, but making their presence clear. Shall we go, sir? One of them said politely. He looked at Lorraine one last time. You've made a terrible mistake. No, Lorraine said softly. I've made the right choice. I've stood up for the people you insulted. I've defended the values of decency and respect that this show has always stood for. And I've shown that nobody, not even a prince, gets to come here and abuse my hospitality. Former prince, he corrected bitterly. Former guest, Lorraine shot back. He stared at her for another long moment, and then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, the security guards following at a respectful distance. The studio remained silent as he left, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented moment. When the studio door finally closed behind him, Lorraine turned back to face the camera. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her dress and fixing her hair. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Well, she said, a wan smile crossing her face. That was unexpected. I apologize to anyone who tuned in hoping for a pleasant morning interview. But I want you all to know something. I will always, always stand up for you. The people who watch this show, who support this show, who make this show possible. You are not lazy. You are not small-minded. You are the heart and soul of this nation. And nobody, I don't care who they are or who they used to be, gets to say otherwise on my watch. The studio audience erupted into applause. Not the polite, measured applause of a typical talk show, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. People were standing, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. Lorraine's own eyes glistened as she looked out at them. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, let's take a quick break, shall we? When we come back, we've got a lovely woman from Yorkshire who started a community garden that's bringing her whole neighborhood together. Now, that's the kind of story I want to tell. That's the kind of person I want to celebrate. As the show cut to commercial, Lorraine sat back in her chair, letting out a long breath. Her producer rushed over, headset askew, looking both concerned and amazed. Lorraine, that was incredible. Are you okay? Lorraine nodded slowly. I'm fine, love. I'm absolutely fine. Better than fine, actually, because I did what I had to do. The phones are going mental, the producer said. Everyone's calling in to support you. Social media is exploding. People are saying you're a hero. Lorraine waved that away. I'm not a hero. I just refuse to let someone disrespect the people I care about. That's not heroism. That's just basic decency. But as she sat there in her studio, surrounded by her crew and her audience, Lorraine Kelly knew something had shifted. She'd drawn a line. She'd shown that kindness doesn't mean being a doormat, that warmth doesn't mean accepting abuse, that being Britain's sweetheart doesn't mean tolerating someone who sneers at Britain. Back in the green room, staff members were quietly packing up the prince's belongings. His publicist was on the phone, damage control already in full swing. But out in the studio, Lorraine was preparing to continue her show, to talk to that woman from Yorkshire, to celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because that's what she'd always done. That's what she'd always believed in. And one entitled guest wasn't going to change that. The makeup artist touched up Lorraine's face during the commercial break. You were amazing, she whispered, standing up to him like that. Lorraine smiled, a real smile this time. Someone had to, and it might as well be me. When the show came back from commercial, Lorraine was her usual self again. Warm, engaged, genuinely interested in her next guest's story about transforming an abandoned lot into a thriving community space. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Here was someone who actually cared about people, who actually did something positive with their platform, who actually understood what it meant to serve a community. The woman from Yorkshire talked about the children who helped plant vegetables, the elderly neighbors who shared gardening tips, the sense of belonging it had created. Lorraine listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, celebrated every small victory the woman described. This was what mattered. Not privilege or titles or royal connections, but real people doing real good in the world. As the interview wrapped up, Lorraine thanked the woman warmly. "You're an inspiration, truly. Thank you for sharing your story with us." The woman blushed with pleasure. "Thank you for having me. Though I have to say, after what we all just witnessed, you're the inspiring one. Standing up like that." Lorraine shook her head. "I just said what needed to be said, what any decent person would have said." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She'd taken a stand. She'd shown that there were lines that shouldn't be crossed, values that shouldn't be compromised, people who shouldn't be insulted. And she'd done it on live television, in front of millions of viewers, without hesitation. The rest of the show continued smoothly. A cooking segment, a fashion feature, some light celebrity news, everything back to normal, as if the explosive confrontation had never happened. But it had happened. And everyone who'd watched it would remember it. In living rooms across Britain, people were still talking about it, texting their friends, posting on social media, calling their relatives. Lorraine Kelly, the woman they'd invited into their homes every morning for years, had stood up for them, had defended them, had refused to let anyone, even royalty, look down on them. And in that moment, she'd become more than just a television presenter. She'd become a symbol of something bigger, of dignity, of self-respect, of knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. As the show signed off for the day, Lorraine gave her usual cheerful goodbye. That's all from us today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Take care, everyone. The cameras stopped rolling. The audience filed out, still buzzing with energy. The crew began breaking down the set, and Lorraine sat in her chair for a moment, alone with her thoughts. She thought about what had happened, about the anger she'd felt, about the words she'd said. She didn't regret any of it, not one word. Because sometimes kindness meant being firm. Sometimes warmth meant standing your ground. Sometimes being everyone's friend meant being willing to make an enemy of someone who didn't deserve your friendship. Her phone was buzzing constantly in her dressing room. Messages of support, interview requests, statements from various organizations praising her stance. But she ignored all of it for now. There'd be time to deal with the aftermath later. For now, she just sat in the quiet studio, grateful that she'd stayed true to herself. Grateful that she'd defended the people who mattered. Grateful that she hadn't backed down, because that's who Lorraine Kelly was. That's who she'd always been, and that's who she'd always be. A champion for ordinary people, a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of warmth and kindness who nonetheless knew when to draw the line. And today, she'd drawn that line in permanent marker. The security footage would later show the prince leaving the building, his face still red with anger, his publicist scrambling behind him, trying to keep up. He climbed into a waiting car and was driven away, disappearing back to whatever life he'd built for himself across the ocean. But Lorraine stayed. She stayed in that studio, in that city, in that country. The country he'd insulted, the country she loved, the country full of the people he'd sneered at and she'd defended. And tomorrow morning, she'd be back in that chair with that warm smile, ready to welcome new guests and tell new stories and continue doing what she did best. Being Lorraine Kelly, Britain's sweetheart, who just happen to have a backbone of steel.